Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John, for doing that. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is having a great Tuesday morning. I want to thank you all for being here with us today. We look forward to doing another great home-based meetup session. As you know, our plan was to kind of be out and amongst you right now, but we just decided this year it was better to do all virtual. So we're going to continue doing all virtual this year, and hopefully we can get back out to you next year. Next slide, please. Most of you are aware, I just want to remind you that these are the products that are in home base. I'm not going to go through them, but you know we are here for the instructional improvement system here today, Schoolnet. Next slide. This is my favorite meeting of the year. I always enjoy the conversation that comes from it. It's always good to have us communicate with you and get feedback from you. So thank you very much for being here today. Next slide. There are the registrations for the rest of the week. I know many of us wear many hats. So if you need to attend those others, please click on that registration link in order to get ready for those sessions upcoming. You have 2 sessions tomorrow with powerschoolearning.com and then Canvas and Go Open on Thursday and Friday. Next slide. There is our schedule. We have them this week and then mid-November and then early in February and then early in May. So please be on the lookout for those. Next slide. There are where all the presentations will be located. I highly recommend that you keep that bit.ly for this opening presentation and come back on Friday where you can get all of the information that was shared from all of the meetups throughout the course of the week. Next slide. We really have one big update. And that big update is we are very glad to welcome Corey McNeil starting on Monday, October 4th. He will be serving as the product manager over Canvas and Go Open. He is going to bring a ton of energy and great usage of those products from out in the field. And we are looking very forward to him being here and starting with us next week. Next slide. We've put this out last home base. We did not get quite the response I wanted, so I left this in. I'm going to drop that link into the chat, and then if you would please take time to fill that out. Please share that with folks in your district. I'm going to put it in PowerSchool next week. I really would like to see more people tell us what they think Homebase is doing for them and the products we offer. This will help guide us and the advisory board as we work through whether Homebase is really truly meeting the needs of all the people out there. I know you're thinking we have 7 products. It's a long survey. It is not a long survey. You could take it start to finish in less than 5 minutes. So please make sure that you fill out that survey so that we can ensure we're getting positive feedback from you on where we need to go. And then next slide. There's all our call signs. Please reach out, like us on Facebook. We greatly appreciate you following us on social media, as well as we added on YouTube a home base overview if you want to share from Powtoons we made. Next slide. And there is our home base team, and you can also provide feedback from this session and the sessions we provide there at that feedback link in the corner. I do want to say that I think we have a very good team that does their best. We worked all hours of the night in some cases in order to meet your needs and get you what you need. So we're here for you, and that is obviously the most important thing for us, is that we are serving you correctly. Thank you very much for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to John. Thank you, John, and have a great session.
Thank you, Rob. So we will go ahead and shift over to our Schoolnet slides. I just dropped the bit.ly for that back into the chat too, in case you need it. So good morning, everyone. So as always, welcome to the home-based meetup for Schoolnet. I'm John Mars, your Schoolnet product manager and trainer for all home-based applications. And joining me today, we also have Catherine Simone and Amanda Phillips from Pearson. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves real quick.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you or not see you again. We have hopefully an insightful session for you today, some requests from last year that we're going to address. So I'm kind of excited for today. Amanda?
Good morning. Looking forward to today. I'm y'all's education and technology support. So look forward to what we have in store.
Thank you very much. So today we will run through some pretty quick Schoolnet updates, some state assessment information. We've got a couple of breakout room topics that we can dive into. I'm thinking maybe 15, 20 minutes, just depending how the discussions go. And then we will shift into our training session, where Catherine will be showing us all about performance-based assessments and answer key only assessments, which I'm pretty excited for. Sort of more ways to use Schoolnet outside of just log in, take a test. So that would be great. And then we'll wrap up with some reflections and kind of a debriefing from the breakout rooms as necessary, and any other questions you may have. So without further ado, our Schoolnet updates. Number one, and I feel like I forget to say this all the time, but please double check that NCDPI has the correct Schoolnet lead and backup listed for your PSU. So that link there on bullet point 1A, please check yours here. That will take you to the page on the DPI website where that is all posted. If you do notice any updates that are needed, you can put in a ServiceNow ticket or you can email Yolanda. Her email address is right there on screen, and we'll get that updated. But that's the list I use when I need to get something out to, just a Schoolnet lead for some reason. That's where I go. So very important those are up to date. Feature opt-in forms. We got them in from everyone who submitted one, but please shoot me an email if you have any questions, concerns, you realize you want to adjust something last minute, and we can see if we can accommodate that. So hopefully everyone is good there. 3, in case you missed it, there were thousands of new items added earlier this month. If you search by the date added of September 2nd, you will find those. There is one itty-bitty little issue with those, though. We realized after they went out that some of the math questions were missing images. So we are working with NC State to get that resolved. And hopefully we will have those back out for you very soon. We pulled those questions, right, Catherine? Okay, cool. So those should be back out there very soon, but many other questions are still newly added and aren't missing their images. So new stuff out there. And then just a couple sort of bug issue updates that we have. First of all, resolved. We had a bug sort of through the beginning of the year where the new test details page wouldn't always show the proper links and actions on screen. So like you might see the, edit schedule and settings link just disappear. That has been resolved with a Schoolnet patch that got applied in the last month or so. So that should be all set now. Please let us know if not, of course. We also noticed an issue when you are scheduling a test for an XG student. So that is your extra grade. So in PowerSchool, that's a grade level of -9. In Schoolnet, that appears as a grade level of 12 plus. And it is the extra grade where you would send a 12th grader who's going to return to continue receiving services up until 22. So when you're scheduling a test for one of those sections, by default, Schoolnet tries to say, okay, you probably want all 9th through 12th grade sections to assign this to. But if a student, an XG student is enrolled in that section, it no longer meets that filter criteria. So the workaround for that is to just make sure you clear out that grade level criteria if you're having trouble finding class sections that have XG students in them. As long as you clear that grade level filter, you should be able to assign any tests that you need to. but that filter will make the sections not appear.
Just
anything to add on that, Catherine? Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So starting back at the actual steps, and I can show you this if anyone needs this, or if you need help, you can always submit a ServiceNow case. But if you have the 12 plus students, the XG students, you cannot utilize the default assignment when assigning a test. You will need to edit the assignment and then just choose your subject area. Leave the grade levels blank. There's a go button there. You would hit the go button and it takes you to the course list page. If you know your course number, you can just type it in and search by that, or you can scroll down and look through the list and actually physically click on the courses to which you would like to assign the test. So again, just to reiterate, the default assignment needs to be overlooked when you have XG students in the sections. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine. And James, I'm not sure if we have put that out in writing, but I will get it out in writing. So keep an eye out for that on the Schoolnet list. I'll get that out there. Any other questions on that one? Looks like we're good. Okay. So next up, we are also aware of some issues where the classroom assessment monitor fails to load or is slow.
It basically times out, John.
Oh, yes.
So, and it's only the first 3 tabs. So when you're looking at the classroom assessment monitor, there is it says district and local tests. I don't know if I can, am I able to share at this point, John?
I think I have to stop sharing for you to share.
Okay.
I can though, certainly.
All right, because I have my screen open. I'll just click over to that if I can. And then I can show a little bit better.
Absolutely. Okay. You should be able to now, I think.
Okay, I think I can. Let me give it a try. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Are you seeing the training site?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the training site, so it is obviously a little bit different, but what we're referring to is in the classroom assessment monitor, when you try to click on district and local test, classroom test, or standardized test, these 3 are very slow to load. They may eventually populate the data, but right now it's timing out and there is a fix coming soon. But this test management tab, this is the place where you can get to the score the test, the proctor dashboard. This is still functioning properly. The workaround for these tabs is to use the reporting dashboard, because it's basically presenting the same information, the results of the test. And you can access the results of the test from the reporting dashboard, and, you know, choose your section here. If you're a teacher, or if you're leadership, you can choose the teacher and then the section, and then the test will populate. So that would be the workaround for for that particular bug that we're waiting for the fix. And I'll stop sharing, John, so you can go back to your PowerPoint. Sorry for that.
No worries. Thank you very much. The demo never hurt anybody.
Excuse me.
Get all my little WebEx panels set back. It loves to reset itself. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Almost. All right. So that was
number 6.
Number 6, thank you. So then number 7, we saw a few questions about this kind of as the year got started, and I just thought it was worth mentioning. So if your teachers, administrators, anybody is trying to reuse a test from last year in a subject where the standards have changed, they should be able to still go back and see their old test. but before they'll be able to make a copy and assign it for this year, they'll need to go in and actually update those standards alignments. I believe it'll stop them from copying, won't it, Catherine?
You cannot copy the test until the standard alignment is updated. I believe that the last meetup last year is when we provided the demonstration of this, because this was the 23.0 version. So if you have that saved, or I think you can access it, right, John, through the DPI site, your resources site.
Yes.
That's where the directions are for the archive standards. Right now, we haven't archived any standards except for CT, so this is where it applies. And just a reminder, you only have access to modify the standards on an existing test if you have permissions to modify the test itself. So what am I referring to? I have a leadership role. If a teacher asks me to modify the standards on a My Classroom test, I am not able to adjust the test in any way because I do not have permissions to access a My Classroom test. So the teacher who created the test and has ownership of the test would need to be the one that modifies the standards on that particular test, just to clarify that. But it's as simple as going in to the actions on each item. On a completed test, it will say modify, change the standard alignment, save it, and then you should be able to copy the test into the new year. Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'll leave number 8 for you. I think that one.
Okay. No
mostly yours.
So, Amanda, correct me if I get the districts wrong, but I think the initial issue with this came up in Dublin. And then we had a couple other districts that reported this. District benchmarks, this is where we've seen it. And it's not to say that it wouldn't happen on a school assessment, but we just haven't seen that reported yet. District benchmarks were scheduled and assigned. And then, for whatever reason, new sections or new teachers were synced with Schoolnet, and the assignment on the original district benchmark did not capture the new sections. Here again, our development team is working on a permanent fix for this. But in the meantime, we're asking that if you're seeing that you have scheduled a district or school assessment to a course, and for instance, John Mayer's section 1A does not have access to the test, please put in a ServiceNow case and we will resync that test for your sections at this time. Did I get that right, Amanda? Okay, thank you. Just checking that I got all that in there. All right.
Awesome.
That covers the workarounds, John.
Thanks. So it looks like our chat has been quiet through this, so I hopefully that means there are no questions on anything. So we'll go ahead and plow ahead. So I do have some usage data I'll share. So this is the year-to-date submissions as of the end of August for 2019, 2020, 21. As you can see, a pretty solid downward slide in test submissions. I think a lot of this probably COVID, right? But certainly let us know if, there's a particular reason in your PSU it's being used less that, maybe we can address. Or, just any thoughts you may have, feel free to drop them in the chat or shoot me an email or talk to us about it in the breakout rooms here in a few minutes. But that's kind of where we stand right now, and we will see how the year progresses. Moving on to PD updates. In case you missed it, I do have the new version of Keeping It Simple in Schoolnet 23 out on Nisus now. So this is sort of an introductory course to Schoolnet. It will take participants through navigating the homepage, creating a test, administering the test with their students, including a look at how the students actually log in and take it, and then finally wraps up with just a quick drive-by of all the reports and results from a test. So that link there will take you straight to the registration for that course in Nisus. One teeny tiny tip, I tried a new thing in this course. We have Canvas Studio now, which is pretty cool, and it lets us make video quizzes. So the way the course is supposed to work is you watch the video, it pauses and asks you a question, you answer, submit, and it continues playing. I've had reports, though, that the video sometimes skips during playback. So if that happens to you, I've heard that if you flip below the video, you'll have a couple tabs in Canvas. If you flip to the quiz results tab, I've heard that that fixes it. If that doesn't do it for you, you can always go search for Keeping It Simple in Schoolnet 23 on YouTube, and you'll find the same video on YouTube, so you could watch it there, come back to Canvas and answer the questions, and then your certificate will pop up in Nisus. And thank you, James. James says he's taken the course, and he loves how the last half of it focused on data. So thank you very much, James. Glad to hear that has been helpful out there. I am currently working on updates to the collaboration in Schoolnet course that we had last year. Last year's version of the course is still out there in Nisus. You can still sign up and take it. Most of that course content really won't change. We just need to re-record the sections that look at the test details page and anything else that got updated over the summer. But for the most part, co-authoring and collaboration pretty much works the same way. So that's still out there, and I will hopefully get that update out in the next month or so. Looking forward further into the year, I've got in my head that I'm going to make courses on creating items in item banks, kind of taking a deeper dive into that. One on advanced assessments, the performance-based assessments and answer key only assessments that we'll look at today. And then probably one on diving into data, where we take sort of a closer look at all of those reports that we drove by in the Keeping It Simple course. And again, if you guys have any other course requests or ideas, I am wide open to any of your suggestions, whatever would be helpful for you. So again, feel free to drop those in the chat or shoot me an email, or talk to us about it in the breakout rooms here in a little bit. So before I move on, any questions on DPI updates, usage, PD, anything we need to address? It looks like our chat's pretty quiet still, so it's probably a good thing. Cool. So next up, we have some information on the state assessments. Those are all rolling out now. And I will turn it over to Catherine, I think, to just kind of give us an idea of exactly where we are with those.
Okay, so so far we have, just because of the timing of the year, all release tests, NC final exams, semester 1, and the middle school final exams. The Certica ELA testlets, beginning of the year and middle of the year, all Certica math testlets, and the math sets, beginning of the year, have all been pushed out and recommended to districts. Those of you that responded to the survey for the release tests and the final exam test, the direct assignment of those is in progress. I know that the release are pretty much complete. I prioritized because they have to be done individually by district. So if you responded to the survey, you got first priority. But everyone else that took the default setting, I'm running through that list now. Same with the final exams. Amanda is currently working on the Certica assignments that was recommended to teachers, just to remind you. So the default was it was being left as recommended to districts. If you responded to the survey, then those tests are being recommended to teachers. So again, those, everything is available. It's the specifics of, like I said, we have to go through district by district with the test. All the test IDs are the same, whether they're recommended to districts or assigned to courses or recommended to teachers. And I believe, John, you posted that sheet already. If not,
Yes.
I will regather it before the end of this and put it in the chat there for everyone. But that's the update for the state assessments. If you have any questions, or you're looking for something and you can't find it, please don't hesitate to put in a service now so that Amanda or I can pick it up and point you in the right direction with these. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine. And yes, so you'll notice linked here on the slide, there is a Google Sheet and a PDF version. So I'll run through the Google Sheet real quick. It's divided into tabs. You've got the master list, the first tab. This is every single state assessment that is currently in the system for this school year. I should qualify. Sorted by grade level and then by test name. And then along the bottom, Certica ELA, Certica Math, Math Sets, NCFEs, and then the release tests. And again, every tab is sorted by grade level, then by name. It's got the test ID there for you. And I even left the links. So if you are already logged into Schoolnet, you can actually click these test names and it'll just take you straight there. It should anyway, I think. So that is out there for you. Any questions on state assessments before we moved on? And thank you, Cami. Just dropped the link to that sheet in the chat. And we will get that link published out in communications this week as well. If you saw my prior communication on state release tests, we did send one out, I think, week and a half ago, something like that. A preliminary list I sent out. This is the same exact document, same exact link. It's just been updated now with all of the tests. So if you saw that, still the same link, and we will get an updated little blurb out with it this week. So that now brings us up to our breakout rooms. So before I move into the topics, I will just remind you that while this main session here is recorded, our breakout rooms are not recorded. So please feel free to turn off the filters and tell us what you really think, because it's a lot easier to, assist and support when we know what you're really thinking. So once we get started, in your WebEx panel at the top right should be your participants pane. Once the breakout rooms open, you should see a new tab in that participants pane at the top called breakout rooms. From there, it should allow you to select one of our 2 breakout rooms. And I think we'll just dive in, select one, dive in. And then we will spend maybe 15, 20 minutes, just depending how the discussion goes. And then we'll kind of debrief a little bit after our training sessions. So breakout room 1 will be, what are you excited about this year? Or maybe how you're planning to utilize Schoolnet for learning, recovery, and acceleration as we're getting back into the swing of school. And then number 2, are you having any troubles this year? Is there something that we can do to better support your PSU with Schoolnet, or, just anything we can do to assist? So next up is our training sessions. And as I said, we'll kind of debrief these breakout rooms at the end. So feel free, if you, have a thought you're dying to share from the breakout room with the larger group, please jot it down and put it to the side for now. And Catherine, whenever you're ready, I will turn it over to you for performance-based assessments. Do you want me to go through the slide deck, or no, you're sharing from demo, right?
So I apologize. I am going back and forth between the training site. I'm going to start on the slide deck, and then I will go to the training site to show you some examples and how-tos. So this um, piece, performance-based assessments and answer key only assessments came up at one of our meetups last year, and John and I thought this might be a great time to share the how-tos of this. So we're going to go through some examples and how-tos. So why would we be using a performance-based assessment? It's a way to collect data for students. If a paper and pencil test or an online Schoolnet or Canvas test is not an option. Suppose a multiple choice test, for lack of a better item type, multiple choice, it doesn't adequately determine the student's skills. And how do you assess a dance class or a music class or driver's ed? So these are all places where you might use some of these assessments we're going to talk about today. I've listed some examples of uses on the left side for you. So early learning, literacy and numeracy. You know, we don't often, in preschool or kindergarten, we ask students to count to 10. And we're assessing them. So where are we recording the data? This might be one option for you, and I have an example of that. As I mentioned, the performing arts, music, art, dance, driver's ed, physical education, a lot of the CTE courses, and for any subject area that has a presentation, speeches, etc. So some of the options you would have. So just let me clarify that the answer key only can be synonymous with the performance-based assessment, and you'll see how they link up when I show you examples. But just keep that in the back of your mind. One, you know, there's an ease of scoring for teachers. You're not lugging around a bunch of papers, and you can employ rubrics in the assessment. And you'll see in a minute that when you score them, it's just a click of the button. Students can actually log into these assessments and view the rubrics themselves. So an example might be a media arts, and how am I assessing my students on their piece of created artwork? And they can view the criteria with which they will be evaluated. And they can self-assess themselves within the performance-based assessment. The students can submit evidence of learning outside of Schoolnet while the data is collected on the platform, okay? Or they could certainly submit information as part of the assessment within Schoolnet. So the remaining slides here are basically steps, directions, screenshots of examples that I'm going to show you within the training site. I had created a demo for the CTE folks for the Health Science 2 course for a problem-based learning assessment. So I'm going to walk you through that in the training site in a minute when I switch screens. But what I want to point out, and I'll also walk you through rubrics, but just like on John's slide, there is a link at the bottom. Hopefully it still opens up and you can still see my screen. And it will take you right to QRC that will show you the information and the specific steps outside of that. So let me get back to this. So we'll cover the how-tos of creating a rubric and linking it to a performance-based assessment. You can add additional resources for the teacher to reference as part of the assessment. Scoring becomes easy. If you've ever scored on a rubric before, it's a click of a button. Or you can opt not to use the rubric and the teachers can input a number for the score on an open response item. And then the student assessment. I love this part. I just want to show you this screenshot here. Once it's enabled and students submit their self-assessment, when you go back and you look at the data on this test, I can see that this student scored themselves at 80% while the teacher scored the rubric at 60% or 80-80, 100-80. So it's an interesting dialogue. Obviously, this was a high school test for the CTE folks to demonstrate, but it presents an interesting dynamic within an assessment that is not just sit down, paper and pencil, or online answering item after item. You can attach references and exhibits for the students to look at and reference while taking the test in these performance-based assessments. And here again, these are all just the bells and whistles. I tried to make sure I included every option possible, not necessary, but there if we're interested in them. Okay, let me switch my screen real quick. Okay, so I am in the training site, and as I mentioned, I had created a performance-based measure for Health Science 2 as a demo. This is the test details page that you're familiar with, and obviously I've carried this test all the way through, but I wanted to show you what it looked like. So when I created this test, item details, it only has 4 questions. And the reason it only has 4 questions is because this is part of the certification for the course, the first part of the course. There were 4 parts to determining whether the student had met all the criteria. Okay. The first question, basically, I just copied right from their guidelines of the question. There's a rubric attached to it, which I'll show you that in a minute. The teachers can view the rubric. There's standards alignments for each question. If this particular assessment, I designed this for the students to log into it, and there are guidelines that they can read here. There are exhibits where they can, as I mentioned before, they can look at the rubric that they're being scored against and self-assess themselves. Whether or not the teacher is having them input any information here is yes or no, it doesn't matter. But each one has the exhibit rubric. They can go through, they submit their assessment, and they can self-score it. Okay, so let me give you a quick glimpse into, if you have not seen this before, I can go and score this test. Let me just hit search or locate section. I don't have a health and science course in the training site, but here's my first student. This child has already scored. You can see I've clicked. I'm going to click the bottom here to get a kid that I didn't. Oh, maybe they're all scored. Sorry, I probably did this whole section already. But if I wanted to change this, you can, it's just a click. You can add information, comments, feedback to the student. If the student has scored themselves, you would see it here, and they can save it. So it's easy for the teacher to score it, the student's assessment. They can view the full rubric and read it as they're scoring the actual item. Remember, again, this was something that the students did outside of Schoolnet. So the teacher is probably looking at a piece of evidence or an artifact that the child created, and they're scoring the information in here. Okay. So how did we get here? Let me go back to you have a couple of options. Let me just show my early learning, the other end of the spectrum example. I made a letter sounds and recognition. This one is answer key only. So there are no questions. There's no content here. There's really nothing to view when you go to the item details. It's one question with a couple of standards, but when you take a look at what I'm scoring for this, let me just grab a quick section here. These particular questions are recognizing upper and lowercase letters. Maybe this is a conversation that I'm having with the student, okay? Demonstrating one-to-one sound correspondence, long vowel sounds and short vowel sounds. So the teacher is actually having a conversation with the student and scoring as they're going along, okay? So those are the options. I just wanted to give you another example at the other end of the spectrum. When I'm creating these assessments, if I'm going to put content for the students to view, I'm going to use a manual test. If the student is not going to log in the instance of the letter and sound identification, then I can use an answer key only assessment. Give an example. Maybe this time I'm going to do early numeracy, and you could drag a PDF sample. So for instance, if I had a couple of 10 frames or a chart of numbers and I'm going to have the students identify them, I could store it here for the teachers. I'm just going to choose my math standards. I can set my math template. Since this is kindergarten, I'm going to just be working on numbers, know the names, counting forwards, and writing your numbers. That's probably good enough for early numeracy. Basically, if in the case of a performance-based assessment, I'm going to leave it at an open response. Maybe this one is just counting, and it's going to be worth 1 point. That's one option, is to leave it as points. I would add an item, and again, change it to open response. Maybe I want to do 3 points here, and this is going to be counting forward. And then my last one was writing my numbers. Maybe they have to write 10 numbers, so I'm going to give them 10 points for that one. Save, go to test details. This schedules the same way, assign it, and then the teacher just scores it within the system. Okay. Let me show you another option. And add an item to this one. Sorry, I'm going to cross content areas, but I've pre-created my literacy rubric, and there's my letter sounds. It always defaults and gives you choices by any subject or grade levels that you would set here, but since I'm going from math to ELA, I'm going to take that letter recognition and sounds rubric that I had before. I'm going to attach it to a question. And now I can see that I'm asking the students for this question to identify uppercase letters, lowercase, consonant sounds, long vowel sounds, and short vowel sounds. Each one is worth 3, and you can view the rubric here. Basically, there's some, how many letters can they identify? I just made this up randomly. But you could weight one more than others. So maybe we are focusing on uppercase letters and lowercase letters. And, you know, if they know their sounds at this point, it's a bonus. But that's one way that you can attach the rubric, and then that gives you that ease of scoring that you saw in that performance-based measure test. Let me get out of this test and show you where you would create the rubric. So under assessments, this time not under test, but under items, rubrics, and passages, you're going to go to create. And we're accustomed to focusing on these items here, but on the right side, I can create a rubric. You can choose to group the standards that you're focusing on, and those directions for grouping are on the link on the slide that addresses rubrics. I always leave mine disabled. This one, let's just call this math. Same as a test, you would pick your subject, your grade level. I know those of you that know me, you know I taught preschool, so you know where I'm going with all this. You choose your standards, and I'm going to go back to my counting and cardinality and knowing my number names. And then same thing I just did on the test. The test I created, but this is just another option of how to create the rubric. Let's do number 2 first. Sorry, I want it to go in order. Let me try that. Number 2, and I can add a row. Get my number 3 standard there for counting. You have to give it a name. So I usually, just because I like to make it easy on myself, I cut from the standard. So it's know the number names, count forward, whatever it is I'm asking the student to do, basically. Oh, I missed saving my 3rd one. Sorry about that. And then this can be any number of levels or points. So if one is, let me see, knowing their numbers, maybe they know numbers, this is kindergarten, so we'll say numbers 1 to 3. And then know numbers 1 to 7. And know numbers 1 to 10. How about? Same thing, could be count numbers 1 to 3. If you want to break it up further, you can add a column there. Oops, messed up. Cut off my 3 there. But you're just filling in the criteria for each descriptor in the rubric. This could be as lengthy or as short as you want it to be. I've seen some teachers do it as beginning, meeting, exceeding, whatever you choose. When you're finished, you save to the bank. I always save it to my personal bank, but obviously if you're school leadership and you want to create a rubric that everyone would have access to and to be able to use for their tests, that is possible. So I'm going to save this to my personal bank. One neat feature about the rubrics is once you create them, you can copy them. And when you copy them and you edit it, I can just call this numeracy, maybe number 2 for lack of a better name. And I'm going to change up my criteria. So maybe this is the beginning of the year rubric. I have a middle of the year and an end of the year. And I'm just tweaking a bit of the criteria for each one. Okay. And then you can create multiple rubrics in that way. When I go back to that assessment, oh, of course, it's not going to my dashboard. Sorry, I went to find my mistake. My AKO here, that was my math. That last one, I had put in a literacy rubric, but now that I've shown you, I can change my rubric here. I'm getting a warning because that was aligned to ELA standards rather than math standards. So now I can switch it out and change it to my math rubric and turn, save changes. And now I've gotten rid of my warning and my test is ready for early numeracy. But those are some uses basically that we have there. Is that a question? Yes. Go ahead, James. I can't see the screen chat, so just drop in and tell me what your question.
Oh, that's no problem. I didn't type it in the chat. So before I started doing the work that I'm doing now as a high school band director, and I see the potential for a great use in the rubrics for arts and probably many other areas that are similar, like CTE. Two questions. Number one, can a student in an open response submit an audio file or like a JPEG of a piece of artwork if it was going to be evaluated, either the musical performance or the art, or it could be a theater or dance, you know, if there was a video of it, I guess. And so that's the first question I have. And second is really more of a comment. I'm wondering if we could get someone in these areas that has had lots of experience in using rubrics to evaluate students who might come together to help support Schoolnet and prepare like a sample rubric that might have commonality across the state for the standards, and then that be pushed out so teachers could use it instead of having to create it. So two things there.
Yes. So the first question, no, they could not upload an audio file directly to the open response. But what I had shown in my demonstration with the CTE folks was that that Health 2 test was given out as an assignment, and the students used the workspaces feature to upload their evidence, be it a picture, a file, etc. I do know that a lot of teachers like to use, like that I work with, use Google Classroom. So I always tell them, you know, it doesn't really matter where the students are submitting the evidence. It's whatever your place is. If you have a Google Classroom or you're using some other platform, but this is the means for recording the data by standards for that particular piece of evidence of learning.
Could they submit a link in, like if they put it in their Google Drive, one of those types of evidence, that's so the teacher, when they're grading the open-ended response, could just click on it?
Yes.
Okay. Lisa had put in the chat, and I agree with her that a lot of people in arts or CTE would probably get, maybe not CTE as much as the arts, but have never really used this program because they never felt that it had any value to them, because it was too cumbersome to, you know, to try to figure out unless they were doing a music history test or an art history test or something. So I do see the value there, especially if there was some preparatory work on the front end that had some examples in that content area.
Yes. And I actually think that, yeah, I don't know, I guess from my perspective, it's actually easy to create and copy a rubric on an AKO test than it is to actually input items into the system. Just my thinking. And also your example about music, I did work with a band teacher who, you know, created one rubric and he just kept copying it and modifying it for different points of the year on different aspects of what he was focusing on. And he basically had a rubric for, you know, each topic of study with the band that they were working on, and he scored his students, you know, weekly as they came to class within the system. So definitely longer term projects for, you know, the visual arts would be great too. Yeah, if anyone has any examples of that are used across your district, we can certainly, input a few for you, so you can take a look at them at the state level, of course. One thing I didn't mention, I neglected to mention, is the other place or content area where I've seen this used is for writing. So we all usually have a rubric for writing, and the students submit a piece of writing, either on paper, or they could in fact put it into Schoolnet, but would be easier to score that on a rubric within the system. So that is another option. I didn't go back to all these other questions, sorry. Any other questions on that, or comments, or ideas that we could maybe help facilitate that? But yeah, definitely anything that we could do to include some of those other content areas would be wonderful. Let me switch my screen real quick. Easier to start with. That's an idea. Art history, evaluation of a work versus student work. That's a good idea.
And Catherine, when we were in the other meeting and we were talking about some of this information or different things coming out to like assistant superintendents and curriculum leaders, if we got to the point that someone shared, we're trying to do this in Schoolnet, do you have any volunteers that might want to help develop this? I think that would be a good way to capture some teachers that, and if there was some kind of working session, be it virtual or in person, to help.
Yes. So John, I think you may have missed that piece in our breakout session, but what James is referring to is that Dottie had brought up about trying to increase usage, and that maybe just having a revisit of Schoolnet at the regional superintendent's meeting and regional curriculum meetings would remind them that their district has this platform, and ways in which they can use it. And now James is piggybacking on how to bring in other content areas, and maybe getting some of the leadership involved in just, hey, here's an idea how you can use Schoolnet and we can help your teachers with it. So that was one. Sorry, I know I'm like 3 slides down on the breakout rooms, John. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I like that idea. I'll float that around internally some and see what we can do to make that happen.
So the tests that I made in the training site, they are public. If you're looking for those IDs, I can get them to John and he can get them out there. So you can see the ins and outs, make a copy of them, whatever you want. But it's a fairly quick process, and I agree with, if you have a copy of a rubric and you want to see what it looks like, just send it to us, and we'll see if we can mock it up for you. That's actually what happened with the CTE folks. A lot of what they weren't quite ready this year with all of the different courses, but one thing they were looking at is how to incorporate these performance-based measures, they're calling them, and ways that we could facilitate that for them. With their particular rubrics, they have a lot of weighting of the individual standards. So this component is 5 times this component. So there was a lot of mathematics involved in figuring out how we could get those scores to tally correctly. But it was pretty extensive, and I think it's a good example. While we can certainly show our teachers something much, much simpler, that's here's all the bells and whistles that you could possibly do in Schoolnet. So any other questions, comments, something you would like to see. Just a reminder, let me see if I can switch my screen without losing you all. Am I sharing the PowerPoint right now, John?
Yes, we've got the PowerPoint.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so student self-assessments, there's a link at the bottom of that screen. Let me just present to make this bigger for you. There's a link here, one for scoring instructions, one also for open response items and creating rubrics. And I think that was, and the answer key only test creation. So if you weren't using the answer key only model, you would just create a manual test and choose open response items for that. If there aren't any questions, John, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you.
So next up, we have reflections and kind of wrap up. So we'll kind of start with our breakout room debriefings. I know in my room we were talking about, teachers getting back into it, getting back into things, maybe the idea of reintroducing some of them. We talked about state assessments being in there still again this year, which is awesome. Trying to think of any other standout topics. Anyone else from the first breakout room want to share anything we discussed? All right. Well, just kind of general positive talk there. And Catherine or anyone from the second room, any sort of broad strokes, key takeaways?
Yep. So as I mentioned, Dottie was looking at ways to increase usage and maybe reintroduce at those regional meetings for the superintendents and assistant superintendents. Might be a good idea. And then to let them know that their Schoolnet leads have attended these trainings and are aware and can support their teachers if they choose to move in some of these other directions. One thing that came up was with a couple districts that the survey that we put out for assigning the state assessments, maybe in the shuffle of the summer didn't make it. But, never fear if you missed the survey and you wanted to add your district to the list for having your test either recommended to teachers or assigned to courses, just reach out to John and he will add you to the list and let Amanda and I know, and we can take care of that. The next thing that came up, because we discussed the third question on the survey, was the semester extensions. And Rob had actually posed the question, do you think it would be helpful to have a webinar surrounding the semester extension and what it would entail and mean for teachers and the advantages of choosing that option? So that we thought that was a good idea. Another one was that when there seems to be a large number of cases coming in for students not appearing in Schoolnet, and we felt like it was in direct contrast to the usage being down, but we feel like we have more people trying to use Schoolnet this year. But we have a cheat sheet list, John, thank you for that we provide to districts, check the dates, check the tracks, check things like that. But one thing was brought up that if there is a new student, before they can log into Canvas to take a test, they need to log into Schoolnet to authenticate. So just a reminder, and maybe we can add that to the reminders for the field. Don't forget, new students need to log into Schoolnet first. And then John, I think you probably can answer that overlap date a little bit better than me that James brought up.
Yes, yes. So I caught the tail end of Breakout Room 2 with the question of, so you're at PSUA and you have a student transfer into you new at the beginning of the year from PSUB, right? But PSUB put a student or no-showed that student on a day after their entry date into your school. So maybe they started in your school on 8/16, but the other PSU marked them as 8/23 in and out no-show. So this is where that summer no-show date of 7/1 or 7/6 comes into play. That prior PSU needs to change that no-show to be 7/6 or 7/1 or some date prior to your school's start date, assuming that that student was actually, in your school physically there attending, marked present, right? So in those cases, first thing you'll need to do is call the previous PSU, figure out what agreeable date you can change that prior enrollment to in Power School. And then the second thing is you both need to make that change on both sides with that prior enrollment. So at the student's current school, PSUA, you'll find that previous enrollment, you'll change the entry and exit date to be that date that you agreed on the phone. And the prior PSU will go find that inactive student record. They'll make the same change to the student's last enrollment line at their school. Now both systems are in agreement. In the next sync, they should come back into Schoolnet correctly. And that may also resolve if you had trouble with them transferring into ECATS. That tweak should fix that as well. I just heard from the ECATS team about that the other week. That was the process. So if you do have overlaps like that, work with the prior PSU, give them a call, get that date tweaked on both ends, and that should fix really a lot of different problems in a lot of different places. Hopefully that made sense.
Okay, and I think that was it for our breakout room, John.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. We have a lot of great notes and action items for us to work on here at DPI. Is there anything else anyone would like to share? Feel free to unmute or jump into the chat.
I have one question. You mentioned ECAPS. Is ECAPS now talking with Schoolnet regarding student accommodations?
Sadly, no.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I've been telling people to go in and add or enable it, but then I wasn't sure if it was, will it be in the future or,
I think that's something that we've looked at in the past, and it's certainly something that I think we could look at again. I think some of the issues we had in the past is just, reconciling the million possible accommodations we have, right, with the accommodations actually available in Schoolnet. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I remember us coming up to a wall. So ECAT's accommodations into Power School, and then Schoolnet could pull them from Power School, right? But if we pull accommodations from Power School into Schoolnet, and then you need to make Schoolnet do something other than what Power School says, the sync the next night is going to overwrite your manual change. Am I wrong on that, Catherine, or was that? I think that was our stumbling block most recently.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding. Are you talking about things like text to speech, line read? Okay.
Yes.
So no, Schoolnet does not pull that from Power School.
That's why we've been going in and adding it, because it just,
Right.
if it changes, the students reevaluated, 504s aren't in there, all that stuff. So we've just been doing it. So I wanted to make sure.
There is a means to bulk upload a file of PMPs for a district. if that is something you're interested in exploring, I would set up a call with you. It's not something I would take lightly because it's a lot of data that you are manipulating within the system.
I think there's just too many changes, ongoing. It would be impossible to keep it up,
Right.
But thank you.
In the past, what I've seen is normally that's something that is assigned to the case manager for the student to update, and they have 20 students and they're responsible for managing the PMPs for those students.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, I see Lisa saying in the chat she wouldn't touch that one, and I don't know I would have either. Myself, but it's good to know the option is there if anyone would dare.
Yes.
Certainly happy to work with you, like Catherine said.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone have anything else before I get to our very last bullet? Okay, cool. Well, that pretty much does it for us today. We do have the link here, bullet point number 3, a bit.ly to give us feedback, and I will type that into the chat right now. So please take some time to complete that form and provide us feedback on how we did today. We do look at these responses all the time to make sure that we're on point and we're getting you what you need. You can optionally at the end also provide your name and email, and it will automatically send you a certificate for 0.1 CEUs that count for digital learning competencies for the training portion of today. Will take us to our very last slide. It has the same bit.ly link there at the top right and a reminder of our team. So if there's nothing else, I'll hang out here for a little bit longer. But I thank you all for joining us today. I hope you've had a great start to your school year and have an awesome rest of your semester. Please reach out if there's anything we can do. See ya.